The redacted Mueller report isn't even out yet, but guess what? Some in the media already saying there's a cover-up.
Barr is either whitewashing here or, worst case scenario, engaged in covering something up.
He's now looking more partisan.
This is the guy that Donald Trump chose. There's a reason.
He looks like a classic Washington guy at the big desk out in front of the boss, who protects the boss.
You think that it's going to look like a cover-up?
What specifically in the four-page summary do you think could be the cover-up?
Donald Trump got his man. He wanted somebody who was going to be loyal. He wanted a protector. He wanted a fixer.
Joining us to react to this is Fox News contributor and author of the upcoming book, Exonerated, Dan Bongino.
Dan, did you get ahead of the report with that book?
Listen, if you do enough homework, you know exactly what's in this report. You know what's in there? Zero related to crimes, hence the title of the book. I had no problem putting that on the title, that book, because I know he was going to be exonerated. I knew it. And so did any other rational actor.
What about the question of obstruction?
Yeah.
It seems like collusion is clear. Mueller shut the door, Barr shut the door, but obstruction is more, the door is ajar. So what are we going to see today?
The obstruction canard was a scam from the start. Here's what's really going on here if you learn to read the tea leaves. Mueller knew instantaneously upon his appointment that collusion was a hoax. How? Andrew Weissman is chosen as his chief bulldog, his chief investigator. Weissman's already been briefed in 2016, months before Mueller's appointment, about where the dossier came from.
He was at the FBI.
He was, Orr briefs him. This is a fact. This is on the record, and we know it from Orr's own testimony. Weissman knows this case is a dog. There's nothing there. So Mueller, in their effort to keep an investigation open into Trump, to damage his presidency, has to keep this thing open. He can't just come out on day two and say, hey, ladies, gents, this is a big fraud. So what do? They get a gray area discretionary crime, obstruction, for a crime that never happened, and they keep it open for 675 days. This case was a disgrace. There was no reason for this to stay open that long.
People point out to 37 indictments, 7 guilty pleas, 5 sentenced to prison, 5 Trump associates convicted or pled guilty. Total indictments for collusion is 0. But the people say, wow, look at what a great probe. Look at how much they got.
Yeah, that's great.
But nothing directly involved. It's for stuff they did in their past.
Yeah, I was a cop in New York City. That's terrific. There were probably 20 people indicted, 1,000 people brought into Rikers Island last night. It still has nothing to do with Russian collusion. None of that. Brian, that's terrific. Great. Good. Manafort, they pled guilty. Fine. Those crimes had nothing to do with the crime that was allegedly being investigated. Nothing. 0. Not one scintilla of evidence collusion happened.
New York Times is reporting that the DOJ officials talked to Trump's lawyers about this report. This was the headline. White House and Justice Department officials discussed Mueller report before the release. We had Andrew McCarthy on earlier. He said he read the Constitution, that the White House is entitled to this, to know what's in the report, especially when there's no crime, when there's no collusion, and that he reminded us that the president is over the executive branch and he's over the DOJ. But on another network, Chuck Todd was saying that the Attorney General, he said that this is shameless, it's hubris, and he says this is actually collusion. Watch.
The only collusion here is colluding on
This is collusion. This is collusion. By the way, in case you're wondering, what does collusion look like? It looks like the Attorney General briefing, the Attorney General's lawyers briefing the president before Congress or the public.
The investigation is done. It's finished. Shouldn't the president know what's in this report now?
You know, we have to be FCC compliant here, so I'm trying to control my New York. These aren't serious people anymore. I mean, can we just be Chuck Todd, Rachel Maddow? They're not serious people. Ainsley, they missed the 2 biggest stories of our generation. They missed the fact that collusion was a hoax and spying was real. They got the story backwards. They thought collusion was real and spying was a hoax. They missed the 2 biggest stories of our generation. We're supposed to take Chuck Todd seriously. And one other point on this. This is collusion. I mean, does he realize people saw that? That was on the air. That wasn't like a Blog Talk Radio. He did that on a major network and said that. How is that? The president invoked no executive privilege whatsoever. The Barr summary written in conjunction with Mueller indicated there was no effort whatsoever to obstruct the probe, right? And Mueller was never fired despite the hysterical rantings of people like Chuck Todd and others that he was going to fire Mueller and that the walls were closing in. And you're still insisting there was an effort to obstruct this? I mean, are they concerned about what their grandkids are going to think about their reputations?
Let me play this out today. You know, this is how it's going to play out today. Look at all the times that President Trump yelled at Don McGahn, that Sessions is incompetent, that Mueller needed to be fired, and that Sessions should unrecuse himself, that Rosenstein's corrupt and was was going to wear what. That's going to be all in this. They're going to say, look at all this obstruction. He's rantings of a guilty person.
Okay, Brian, that's fine, but the president's entitled to an opinion. He's the chief executive of the country involved in a case where he feels like his reputation is being maligned for a crime that never happened. It's not that he didn't commit it. It's that it never happened. You got to understand. They were investigating a bank robbery where no bank was robbed. It's not that the bank was robbed and Trump didn't do it. There was no collusion between anybody on his team in Russia at all. He's entitled to his opinion. And one other thing, you just presented me a series of bullet points, fairly enough, devil's advocate, right? I could present to you 5 or 6 others. What about Andy McCabe testifying up on the Hill, the deputy director of the FBI? There's been no effort to obstruct our probe. What about Jim Comey's own memo where he says Trump asked him to investigate, quote, satellites of his that may have been involved in wrongdoing? How's that obstruction? He's asking the FBI director to investigate
And William Barr said
them.
in his letter to Congress that the Mueller team had represented to him as the Attorney General that they had never been blocked in any information that they wanted. So
No
there you
way.
go.
And all of Trump's comments are using were all public. You're going to obstruct an investigation, you do it publicly in front of the national media. Come on, it's all nonsense.
Dan Bongino, appreciate it.
Thanks.
We have the special counsel report here. It's split into 2 volumes. The first volume is devoted to Russia collusion. It's just shy of 200 pages. And the second volume looks at the issue of obstruction. I've been able to peel through it. It's lightly redacted, and where there are redactions, there's actually a statement justifying the redactions, whether it's grand jury material or ongoing investigation. So for folks at home, it's very simplified. It will be easy to follow. I want you to bear with me because I've got 4 areas that I want to highlight and read from the report. The first goes to the issue of why Special Counsel Robert Mueller could not reach a decision on the obstruction question. And it reads, quote, because we determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment, we did not draw ultimate conclusions about the president's conduct. The evidence we obtained about the president's actions and intent presents difficult issues that would need to be resolved if we were making a traditional prosecutorial judgment. At the same time, he writes, if we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would state so. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, we are unable to reach that judgment. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. And that phrase will be familiar to people who've been following this issue because Attorney General William Barr quoted specifically from this section when he sent the bottom line findings to Congress at the end of last month. I want to get to another section here because it goes to the issue of why there was a written question and answer session with the president and the special counsel decided at the end of the day not to subpoena the president and force an interview. And that section reads, we also sought a voluntary interview with the president. After more than a year of discussion, the president declined to be interviewed. Then the following section is heavily redacted and it cites grand jury information. Ultimately, while we believed that we had the authority and legal justification to issue a grand jury subpoena to obtain the president's testimony, we chose not to do so. We made that decision in view of the substantial delay that such an investigative step would likely produce at a late stage in our investigation. We also assessed that based on the significant body of evidence we had already obtained of the president's actions and his public and private statements describing or explaining those actions, we had sufficient evidence to understand relevant events and to make certain assessments without the president's testimony. So the bottom line there is that the special counsel is saying they had a lot of information from other individuals, records that were provided by the White House. They did not feel that they needed to take that step and subpoena the president. They would be satisfied or it was adequate to use the written question and answer sessions. Now, this is a very important part of this, and it goes to the moment, I don't think we've had these details before, when President Trump learned that a special counsel had been appointed.
Page 78, Catherine.
That's right, 78. Now, they're in the Oval Office, and remember, this is those 8 days in May between the firing of Comey and the appointment of special counsel where a lot of very important events go down. And it states, and it's according to notes written by Hunt, this is a member of the team, when Sessions, that's Attorney General Jeff Sessions, told the president that a special counsel had been appointed, the president slumped back in his chair and said, quote, oh my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. I'm effed. The president became angry and lambasted the attorney general for his decision to recuse from the investigation, stating, "How could you let this happen, Jeff?" The president said the position of attorney general was his most important appointment and that Sessions had, quote, let him down, contrasting him to Eric Holder and Robert Kennedy. Sessions recalled that the president said to him, quote, "You were supposed to protect me," or words to that effect. And that goes to something that we heard earlier today from Attorney General William Barr, that there was a lot of anger and frustration on behalf of the president. He characterized it as very genuine because he was not guilty of these allegations of collusion. And I just want to go back to page 75, and then I'll continue reading with more headlines, because it goes to this issue of intent. The president later asked Rosenstein, that's Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who would ultimately oversee the Russia probe once Jeff Sessions was recused, to include Russia in his memorandum and to say that Comey had told the president that he was not under investigation. And the president's final termination letter included a sentence at the president's insistence and against McGahn's advice. That's White House counsel Don McGahn stating that Comey had told the president on 3 separate occasions that he was not under investigation. So on the intent question, the president wanted to make clear that he was not guilty of these allegations of collusion and that this had been shared with him with the then FBI Director James Comey.
Okay.
So I'm going to just take a break
keep
here,
going. Yeah,
continue
we'll let you do
reading and
that.
flagging headlines as we
You
get
bet,
them.
Catherine.
Thank
We'll
you.
come